Elon Musk buying Twitter has certainly gotten a lot of conversations going, not just on the social media platform, but also in the world, talking about free speech. We want to kind of break down what we know at this time as this deal is still underway with our consumer insights and innovation strategist, Lisa Miller. She's joining us here on Live Now from Fox. And I know so many people were concerned. There was others who were happy about this deal. Elon Musk himself saying it's all about free speech. What have you been hearing as far as this Twitter deal takeover and the response from those who are on Twitter platform day in and day out?
Right. It's such a crazy world, right, when all of this is happening. And a couple of things just to get us started is the first thing is, competition is always good. So when we have competition, between the social media, big companies, that's going to raise the game for everybody. But I think one of the things that might surprise people relative to Twitter, its audience is actually quite small compared to a lot of the other platforms. About 23% of Americans are on Twitter versus YouTube at 80%, Facebook at 69%, and even Instagram at 40%. So all in, it's a lot of chatter, but it's actually a pretty small group of people that are on Twitter today. And the other thing that's so fascinating is that when it comes to who's tweeting, it's a very, very small group. About 10% of the Twitter users do 80% of the tweets. And so when you think about that way, right now, there's a small amount of people that are really controlling the conversation. And I think that Elon Musk wants to open that up and grow it and make it competitive with some of the other social media.
Well, and that's what I wanted to ask then, hearing that it's not as many people on it. Do we think once this deal is done and he does take over that platform and he really kind of lets it be a little bit of a place that's broader for all points of view, do we think there are going to be more people who are going to start to log into it and use it as a source to voice their opinion?
Well, the other thing that's so interesting, such a great question. I think that's on everybody's mind, including Elon Musk, because obviously if he's going to put that much money in it, he wants to grow it because he's in it for the business. But what's interesting is that all the different social media platforms kind of have different purposes within consumers' lives. So Twitter is all about the elevator speech. It's where you get your news, what's happening right now. But Facebook is really more about your personal stories, your community, and your family, and they're very different. But the one thing that it's probably not surprising, of that 23% of Americans that are on Twitter, most of them do lean more to the left and more Democrat by 2-to-1 ratio. So right now that the platform today doesn't really represent a holistic view. It is actually very skewed. The other thing too is that on the Republican side, what's fascinating is they actually feel like the banning of people on Twitter, like 60% of Republicans that are on Twitter say it's really bad that the democracy is really sheltered on Twitter today. So if it opens up, I think Twitter audiences will grow.
Yeah, and that was going to be another question. Obviously, we've heard some of those names being thrown out there, being banned from the platform before. Are they going to be allowed back on it? And then, as you mentioned too, if it is going to involve more free speech, more opinions being out there, whether they're right or wrong, a lot of conspiracy theories, a lot of maybe disinformation being shared, but is it going to allow that to be posted? Because some people have said, obviously they appreciated some of that disinformation getting flagged and being taken down, whereas now that could be a concern for some of those users who are on the platform.
Right, and that's that dynamic tension that we're kind of all debating right now. Is at the end of the day, even a large percent of Twitter users today honestly feel like they actually have had misinformation. So that is definitely very real. The other thing that's real, it's a much smaller number, but about 17% of Twitter users actually feel like they've been bullied or harassed on Twitter. And so if those types of things don't change, no matter who owns it, people won't want to be on there, because why should they get bullied? The other important fact too is that a lot of consumers, I think it was about half, actually feel like they might regret something they put on Twitter. And so they feel like it might negatively impact them. So there's a lot of things that are prohibiting or barriers that need to come down before more people will want to partake in Twitter.
And of course, there's still quite a lengthy amount of time before some of those changes would be made on the platform. Have you guys had any insight or have an idea on what the timeline does look like when this deal is going to go through? And then I do want to touch on too that there is the Federal Trade Commission. They're reviewing the deal because again, this is a huge $44 billion deal that Elon Musk did. And of course, a lot of people concerned about his other businesses and now him purchasing Twitter as well.
Yes, and so I don't really have the knowledge on the FTC, but what I can say is that given the magnitude of scale, usually when you have the antitrust, it's that when somebody, becomes so dominant in the industry, and he's actually the smallest game in town versus the other social media. So it'll be interesting to see what they're thinking about relative to the FTC. But the other thing that's interesting, and with he had to sell a lot of the stock, his stock, to be able to pay for it. He did bring in investors, $7 billion worth of investors. And what that people are saying about that is that was to kind of calm down the Tesla investors, because they want to make sure that Tesla and their stock in Tesla is taken care of. So I think that you see that he's pivoted around that to try to keep everybody at peace.
Yeah, and different industries that he's involved with too. It'd be different if he did have a different social media platform that he was in charge of, like you said, where he'd then start kind of building that monopoly. But when you're talking about SpaceX and Tesla and Twitter, those are all three very different entities that he's in charge of.
Absolutely. And the one thing that honestly, if we take it back a step and kind of forget all the chatter about all of this, the one thing that I hope most people can agree is that he does bring innovation to everything that he touches. And when innovation happens, that usually is very good for consumers and the economy to kind of shake things up a little bit. And that's where everybody brings their A game to it. So in that regard, there should be a lot of positive excitement about what innovation. And he's been looking at, you've probably seen of, there's Twitter Blue, and that's where they're charging $2.99 for added features and benefits. And so I think he's going to kind of shake it up and reinvent it. And 9 times out of 10, that's usually a good thing, especially for consumers.
Yeah, I know he's been very vocal on Twitter now, asking opinions from those who are actually using the social media platforms. Hey, what changes would you like to see, and taking some of those things under consideration? Another thing that he had talked about too was trying to get rid of some of those bots, because it does seem like you get those no matter which social media platform you're on, but they're always there bothering people, I feel like, online.
Right. Well, and I think, yes, he definitely has talked about, getting rid of the bots and all of that. But I think what's so positive is asking for consumers' inputs to be a part of the process. And that's just innovation, consumer marketing 101, to make sure you're meeting the needs of the customers. And clearly with such a skew of 10% or so, representing 80% of the tweets, that means there's a whole lot of people that are kind of on Twitter, but sitting in the sidelines and not really participating. And the fact of it's really younger, it skews a little bit more to the left. There's a lot of runway to actually make Twitter more inclusive and more about free speech. So again, if we kind of think about the glass half full, those are the things that probably are going to be very bright spots for this potential acquisition.
And let's just kind of talk about then when we might see some of these changes. Obviously, there's still a lot of pieces that need to be placed before this takeover is complete and before they'd even start to make some of those changes to the platform itself.
Yeah.
This new air cooler is 98.7% cheaper but 10x more effective. Tired of hot?
Yes, and I don't really have any knowledge around the exact timing, but from history, when you look at his kind of operations in the past, he definitely makes pretty swift changes once he takes on a project. And what I see and what his work is again, that entrepreneurial spirit, that innovation spirit is try a lot of things. He may fail often, but he's going to try a lot of things pretty quickly. And also, it will not be surprising if he actually brings in some of his trusted advisors and so on to make sure that when he takes over, it'll go smoothly with people that he trusts.
What do you think the biggest change that users and other people are going to notice once this does finally go through?
Well, I think I would expect, based on, again, his innovation principles, he will do those added features and benefits. I'm not sure if it's going to be like what the Twitter Blue is today at $2.99, but I would imagine there's going to be some some version of pay for more benefits. And I know there's a lot of people that are kind of up in arms, like, oh my gosh, now we're going to have to pay for Twitter. But he on his tweets, he's saying those casual users, and those casual users are probably about 80% of the people that aren't really tweeting anyway. But I think people, as long as it's worth it and the benefits that he's offering are worth it, then I think people will pay. Now, if it's, for the exact same thing today, it's $2.99 tomorrow, just for the exact same thing, that's not going to work because nobody wants to pay more for the same benefits. But I think he'll do a nice job in the innovation space.
Right. I'm excited to see what other kind of ideas, like you said, he obviously has a very smart people surrounding him when it comes to anything that he touches. So I'm excited to kind of see what they might come up with next. Anything you think we left out that's important to mention when it comes to this huge Twitter deal and Elon Musk?
Well, I think that, as I guess I would leave on that innovation, is that one of the things that Elon Musk brings to those industries that he participates in, he creates a future that most of us couldn't even imagine. And when it comes to space travel, when it comes to Tesla, and so we may not even know how far of a future state he might create. But I think that, again, change in that regard is exciting. It's uncomfortable. When we're used to doing certain things a certain way, yeah, it makes us nervous, but at the same time, that's what makes it exciting and fun. So that's kind of how I would kind of close on it.
I'm excited to kind of see where things go from here, and especially with those numbers that you shared in the beginning too, see how the amount of users and how many people are on, but also now finally going to be contributing to just some of those tweets, how it all changes here in these next few months and even a year down the road as well. So we do appreciate all the insight that you've been giving us here today. Lisa Miller joining us here on Live Now from Fox. Thanks so much for giving us more details on this deal.
Thank you, Christy. Have a good one.